an artist. You love to paint, and you're good at it. In fact, people will come from all over the world to your gallery to see your art and to buy it. But you have one secret. You hate your art. You feel no matter how long you work on it or how much you try, it never quite looks right. You think there's always more blending you could do, more lines you could sharpen, and it frustrates you. This feeling is common among artists, but it is also common among everybody. When you are using this term for everybody, it is called perfectionism. This is what some people live with on a day-to-day basis. The feeling that no matter what you do, it's never quite perfect. And the hard part about that is the more perfect you try to be, the more you aim for perfection, the more you see what you don't have. Today, I will explain in further detail what perfectionism is, how it affects me personally, and some steps on how to break through. The American Psychological Association defines perfectionism as the tendency to demand from oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance in excess to what is required of a situation. Experts like Sharon Martin, who is a licensed psychotherapist who specializes in helping her patients work through their perfectionism, have found many roots throughout the years, such as high parental expectations, cultural pressures, a child in need of control, and receiving excessive praise from academic achievements at a young age. Perfectionists can be broken into 3 categories, like Dr. Laura Dorwat can explain them in further detail. Self-oriented perfectionists are completely self-motivated perfectionists. They have no external forces telling them that they need to be perfect, they just expect perfection from themselves. Other-oriented perfectionists are the most rare type of perfectionist. They believe they themselves have reached perfection, and they try to help others around them by being overly critical of their friends and family. And socially prescribed perfectionists are perfectionists who have that external force pushing them to be perfect. This is often the hardest one to treat because you can't change the person's environment. Why do you think perfectionism sounds like a good motivator, a reason to do well in school, a reason to study for your next test? It easily can turn very negative. Perfectionists are more likely to develop anxiety disorders, depression, eating disorders, and other types of OCD. Now that you understand what perfectionism is, I'm going to tell you how it affects me personally. The first test I took in the 7th grade was a life science test. The day the grades came back, I cried for hours. I got a B. Now, you might be thinking a B is not a bad grade for your first test in junior high, but for me, I felt like a failure because I knew that the information that I got wrong in the test had been covered in class. I vowed to myself to never walk into a test unprepared. From then on, I would study the study guides, but I would also memorize them. Front to back, question and answer, I would be able to recite them instead of sleep at night. If I had a test the next day, I wouldn't sleep. I would just sit in my bed and recite the study guide over and over. Now, this wouldn't go for just science. It eventually leached into everything else in my life. All my other classes, and when I was on the dance team, it was very prevalently seen there. When I wanted to have the highest kicks, I wouldn't think that I did. Even if I did, I thought, technically, they could be higher. Or if I was just working out on my own and running, I would, even if I got a good time, I would tell myself I could have ran faster. No matter what I did, or no matter what goal I set for myself, before I reached that goal, I would set a higher one, leaving myself to always feel like a failure. As you can guess, always feeling like a failure does not feel good. It leads someone to feel burnt out very quickly. And that, combined with a lack of sleep, can lead to other things, such as I had mentioned before, such as a depressive episode, which I had. Upon starting therapy, I learned that many people also suffer from this thing I learned was called perfectionism. In fact, 30% of the population will suffer from perfectionistic thoughts at one point in their life. And of perfectionists, 80% of them will have been called gifted as children or received excessive praise at a young age for academic achievements. Perfectionism is common, but it is also unavoidable. So I have learned some things throughout the years that I think have helped me become As a perfectionist, it is so easy to only see your inadequacies and what you haven't done yet, rather than the progress you have made. So it is important to acknowledge your progress as well as what you can work on. 2, determine what is worth your time and efforts. As a perfectionist, I always want to put my best foot forward, but I don't want to tell anybody no. So I tend to overextend myself into too many areas. But doing that gets you burnt out. So you need to be very aware of what is worth your time and efforts. And lastly, remember that perfect doesn't exist. It is a concept you've made up in your mind that you will never reach as a perfectionist. I like to think of it as 2 parallel lines. My idea of perfection and my idea of reality will never meet. And if I don't recognize that, I will never feel complete. Today, I introduced you to perfectionism, how it affects me personally, and some ways to break the cycle. So remember, no matter how hard you try to paint a perfect picture, perfect is unattainable. The beauty in life is in the imperfect, because perfect doesn't exist.